Well, before we let you go, I want to talk to you a little bit. I know, the SEC is locked in on their schedule with ESPN, or their contract with ESPN until 2030. So there's probably not going to be any conference realignment until that contract is coming up for renewal. But what are your thoughts on the idea? There's lots of conversations about the SEC and the Big Ten and becoming these super conferences. Is that the direction that college football is headed?
Allie, this is how I know we're peak off season when conference
Right.
realignment talk comes back. I feared this day. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, I think probably so. I mean, it's hard for any of us to predict what the future of it's going to look like. I mean, imagine me telling you a decade ago the Pac-12 wouldn't exist. It was a sad day when that happened. So, but yeah, I think the SEC and the Big Ten run the sport, and yeah, I would imagine at some point we're going to get to a super conference of sorts. I'm of the belief and of the hope that the G5 eventually wises up and gets its own playoff. Maybe that's an unpopular take, but that's just me. And yeah, I think the P5 is going to break off, and there's going to be a separation. We may not know exactly what it looks like, but there's going to be a separation of sorts. Because again, with every passing day, the NCAA becomes more obsolete. And I think the SEC and the Big Ten, these power conferences realize, like, we can kind of just do our own thing. So, and also the playoff, I don't think that expansion's going anywhere, because all I hear are talking heads say that, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but all you hear is it's going to make the game worse, everything. But the money keeps going up, and somebody's watching the games. The revenue's coming from somewhere, and unfortunately, at the end of the day, the dollar is what talks, and they're not going to go backwards and take money out of their pocket because they feel like it's for the better of the sport. It's just, unfortunately, the people that are making those decisions, I don't know that they love college football and college sports like you and I do, and they think about it that way. So, yeah, I mean, with the ever-changing landscape, continued expansion, revenue sharing now, I'm really curious how that's going to impact things. But, yeah, I think in some capacity we're going to see a split, and we're going to continue to see these conferences grow, and probably some sort of super conference, to your point.
Yeah, you mentioned the dollars driving everything. And to me, like, as somebody who covers Florida State specifically, obviously they've been in the lawsuits with the ACC. Clemson been in those lawsuits too. And we got news on the ESPN and the ACC, kind of binding their agreement. What's been floated is that maybe they'll let Florida State and Clemson out instead of 2036 after the 2030 season so that they'd be free. My best guess, and none of us know, something will happen tomorrow because I recorded this tonight and didn't get a chance to edit it and put it out. I'll have to scrap this. Hey, Chris, can we get you back on? But my best guess is that would be the time frame that we look at anyone moving. The Big Ten's deal isn't up until then. The SEC's actually, goes a couple years after. But that would be my best guess as to when we would start to see big pieces move. What intrigues me, though, is the power that ESPN has and what ESPN could do to throw a wrench in it. And if ESPN thought, hey, I could make a lot more money if people were tuning in to see, our own little version of Deion Sanders, right? In a much different way. Bill Belichick against some of these, SEC teams. Like, my God, could you ever imagine a pregame press conference with Bill Belichick and Lane Kiffin sitting in the same room? Would be the most phenomenal thing of all time. Maybe Nick Saban moderating, since he worked with both. But, whether it's UNC or Florida State Clemson teams involved in the lawsuit, whether it's a Miami going to the Big Ten, whatever changes happen, it feels like we're probably cooled off from it now. But the great wild card to me is what ESPN wants, because ultimately they're the ones signing the $1 billion check, right? Like, hey, this team's coming over, and ACC, you can't stop it, and conference presidents, like, you ain't gonna stop it either, because we're gonna write you a bigger check to do it. So ESPN, like you said, it's all money driven. I, as somebody who wants to get out of the ACC without a doubt, I still don't love it. That's not what the spirit of the sport is. Like, I would much rather go back to just 5 years ago, before Texas and Oklahoma, before Oregon and Washington, before USC and UCLA. I'd much rather be there and in the ecosystem that we lived in. For obvious reasons, that's not what's going to happen and now or in the future, but it is all money driven. And so the ESPN angle is probably the most interesting to me. It's kind of like, what do the people who sign the checks really want? And that's what we're going to get.
Yeah, the TV side of things, to your point, when you have that large of a piece of the pie, I mean, it's got a great influence. I'm fascinated, y'all, with, this past college football season was awesome from the standpoint of, we had so many crazy games and the parity and But I'm curious because, again, I've heard from people, I've heard from the common fan that college football is less likable now. And I'm just curious as we go, nothing is untouchable. I think college football will always be watched at an extremely high rate. I would venture to say us three will always love it. I know I'll always love it. But, like, even this past football season, I remember sitting there in January, I'm like, God, this season feels so long.
Yeah.
Like, why? I'm like, it's almost like I'm having, thankfully for us at SEC Unfiltered, we're not just football, we're talking baseball, basketball. I don't think I've ever been more excited to talk about those other sports because I'm like, I kind of got a little football fatigue, to be honest. And I hate to say that, but it's like, I just wonder as we continue to go and more and more and more changes, is there more of this kind of fatigue that sets in almost? Or does the wear and tear, does it affect I don't know that it's going to affect our passion for it. I'm more so for the common fan. Like, how is it going to affect the common fan and how they, and we have a very different vantage point, right? Because we're in the media space and we see views. And so we can tell whether it's a good season or a highly engaged, we have a different viewpoint of it. So I'm curious how that changes or evolves. Does it continue to go up? Yeah, it's kind of like the Office quote where he's like, what is it? How do you realize you're in the good old days before you leave them or whatever? That's kind of to your point what it feels like. Because I remember, again, being a kid, I'm making myself sound old here, but being a kid watching, Pac-12 After Dark. And I remember Lou Holtz and Mark May on College Football Scoreboard. And those seem like simpler times, man. I don't know. It's weird. We're in definitely a different day and age of college football.
Yeah, I'm with you on the season feeling long. And Josh Pate talked about this. Like, we all thought like, oh, more football is better, but there is an idea of scarcity. Something being less like makes you love it more. And when you just think, oh, the season's 6 months now, like you don't have like the NHL. Like the NHL is like 10 months long. Like you don't have to watch that much NBA is kind of the same way. But the counterpoint of that is like it does go back to the money. And what we've talked about is, as fans, we may hate realignment and NIL and the portal and just everything else, and we may call it NFL light, but the NFL is the most successful from a monetary standpoint and a viewership standpoint, the most successful thing on the planet when it comes to sports. And so they don't love it the way we love it, but the people who write the checks, receive the checks, everything else, they look at the NFL. We hate the idea of making this NFL light. They're like, no, get us as close to the championship game not doing what 15 million or did like 21 million viewers. Every playoff game does better than that in the NFL, right? Like Thanksgiving Day does better than that. Christmas Day does better than that. Like they're looking at it and we may hate it, but they're saying, no, we want the NFL. We want NFL Part 2 here because the money there is so much greater. And again, we don't love that, but that's ultimately where it's going because again, dollars and cents at the end of the day are what's going to dictate our sport.
So I kind of have a slightly different view than both of you guys. I did feel like I got
everything. That's why.
Oh, that's true. I did feel like I got a little bit of football fatigue by the end of the season, but I think there's some things that are correctable that can help that, right? So like one, I think as long as it was just so drawn out, we've got to figure out a way to kind of condense this a little bit. I'm not saying play a playoff game and then 4 days later play another one, but we've got to figure out how to crunch this a little bit. And I think potentially Army-Navy not having its own day might be a way to speed the season up a little bit. But then I think the thing that bothered me the most is that the two essentially biggest upsets that we saw this college football season, Michigan beating Ohio State and Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame, didn't matter at all. And as just a college football purist, that bothers me. So like, I see the argument that we saw a lot more parity and we saw a lot of games matter that maybe didn't matter before. And I love the idea that, my team, the Gators, knocked LSU and Ole Miss out of the playoffs essentially 2 weeks in a row. Like those games had much more meaning towards the end of the season than they would have a year ago. And I like that, but I do not love that some of these big upsets mean absolutely nothing. But I do think if we just simply rank our playoff teams 1 through 12, and that's how the seeding is done, that eliminates some of the college football frustration that happened, because not only are we seeing games going until halfway into January, but we're seeing playoff games where one team is so obviously not making it into the finals that we're not watching it. Boise State gets a bye and they're automatically into the second round. Like none of that. I don't know. It doesn't move the needle for the average fan as much as if we had just watched battles every single playoff game. But I do think just simply changing how we seat maybe eliminates a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think to your point, Allie, that there's adjustments have to be made. I think the most obvious is, to your point, the automatic buys for conference title winners. To me, they should get in. They should automatically be in. But yeah, to your point, 1 through 4, that's the most obvious change I think that has to happen. I do think moving up the playoff could help. I'm curious what happens with conference title games moving forward. They
ESPN's not letting that get away though while we're talking about the money.
Yeah, but the thing is like, to think you could lose a conference title game and not get in the playoff because of it, I think is a really – and we're probably going to run into that again next year where we're going to have that same situation. So, but heck, you could move the playoff up to that point where it starts there. I mean, I don't know. It's there are adjustments certainly within the model we have now that can be made. The most obvious, like you said, is because one of the problems was the season felt long because the games stunk. I mean, let's just call it a lot of the games, most of them stunk. So, that we can get better matchups by having just 1 through 12 ranked. At least we hope.
4 teams are actually the top 4 teams. Yeah. We watch some battles between teams who aren't going to make it to the championship game, but it's a better game.
Yeah, exactly.
Before they are, then eliminated. But this playoff isn't getting us a different end result, in my opinion. Now, Ohio State, if it was only the top 2, obviously would not have been in it this year. I think Ohio State was the best team in the playoffs by far, but I would be totally okay if Ohio State hadn't made the playoff this year because they lost to Michigan the last week of the regular season. And I don't think there's a huge justification for a team that didn't make their conference championship and got waxed by their biggest rival that's not controversial for them to not be in the playoffs. So I would have been fine if they were eliminated. But in general, I don't think we're getting a different champion by spreading it out this big. We're just making more money and having more games.
Yeah, football's kind of a sport where the team with the best roster typically wins. It's not. I'm not saying we should. People push back. Well, then why even play the game? Let's just compare recruiting rankings, and we'll just crown a national champion by who signs the #1 class. It's not that, but you don't have the randomness that you have in basketball, that you have in baseball. Like in football, if I've got the bigger, the faster, and the stronger guys, and I've got more of them than you, we're going to win. And I mean, Ohio State coming in the season, most people would have agreed, yeah, they have more big, fast, and strong guys than everybody else for the most part. So to your point, I mean, we still got Ohio State. We still got Georgia. We still got Texas. I don't really even look at the playoff as like, I don't think the playoff was created to get us to necessarily a different end result or even a different Final Four. It's as silly as what I'm about to say sounds. It kind of feels like it was created. Let's just have some more fun along the way while we do that. Guys, remember, it's not about the destination. It's about the journey and the memories we made along the way. It's kind of what it feels like with the playoff. Because to your point, the best team is still gonna be there. The top 4 still probably gonna be there for the most part. So.
All right, Chris. Well, this was super fun. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Thanks for giving us this much time. We're gonna have to do it again before the season kicks off in August.
Yeah, Allie, TJ, I appreciate it. It was a blast chatting with you guys, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
Let everybody know where they can find your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We're at SEC Unfiltered, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your content. YouTube, podcast as well on our website, secunfiltered.com, and we'll be on the road all calendar year long, so just stay tuned for the announcements. We'll be on the road again, baseball, basketball, and certainly every week of the football season going to a different game. So for the Gators, we look forward to seeing you down in Gainesville very soon.
All right, guys, make sure you are tuning in. He does some really cool work. Chris, I totally enjoyed following you this entire season and all the living vicariously as you tested out every fun college bar in the best conference on the planet.
Yeah, I think I could do a top 25 of the SEC college bars. So I may have to drop my own list.
Next episode,
At least a top 10. We'll have to throw, Salty Dog on there in Gainesville. Yeah, we'll have to beautiful place, great venue. So
Oh, your feet stick to the bottom of the floor. It's
yeah, I
fantastic.
need on that note, I need to get to Tallahassee. I've heard good things about that bar scene.
There's some fun ones for sure.